I really believe that businesses must help save the world. I'm from Brazil, which is a country where we live and feel social inequality every day. That's me at a friend's house, and that's also me at another friend's house. In the first photo, we were celebrating that my friend had just rented her first place. In that house, there were 9 puppies, 2 dogs, 2 cats, a horse, and 6 people living in tents. There was no floor, by the way. The furniture was a table, a stove, and the tents. But everybody was pretty happy. And then in this other one, this was actually a house that belonged to a Brazilian friend of mine, but it was in Paris. She had 3 suites in the house. She had a Mini Cooper in the garage, and it was full of champagne and silverware. And that photo is just an illustration of this very common scene in Brazil where you have these luxury condos and these big slums separated by a narrow road. You can imagine how some of these groups of people feel about each other. I was interested in understanding social inequality better, and I thought that if I studied economics, I would understand the dynamics that lead to that. And I thought it was the government's responsibility to guarantee social development, economic development, and to keep the private sector in check. So I went and I studied that. I also thought that the environmental agenda was very elitist because it just seemed so much more urgent for me to take care of people and not so much to think about how we were going about doing that. So I focused on public sector economics, and I went to work for the government for a little bit, but I wanted to broaden my horizons, and so I went to study abroad. I studied public policy for the Sustainable Development Goals in China, and I studied sustainability more broadly here in Geneva as well. And today I think very differently. I know now that there is some consensus around the world of what are the minimum standards that we should ensure or be aiming for, and that they are both social and environmental and very interlinked. On the social side, we have the International Charter of Human Rights, signed in 1948, and on the environmental side, we have the 9 planetary boundaries, which are thresholds that, if surpassed, put at risk not only our quality of life, but also the very habitability of this world. Some of them are very famous, like climate change or ozone depletion. Others are not so famous, but they are all equally as important for our livelihoods, and some of them have already been overshot. We need to rein in humanity's footprint on the environment and go back to a safe operating space. We are already consuming more than the world can provide to us and already wasting more than it can absorb. There are already internationally agreed upon goals and targets for many of these issues. A big one is the Paris Agreement of 2015, in which the world committed to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, limiting global warming to only 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Another very big one is the Sustainable Development Goals, agreed upon in 2015 to be reached by 2030, that cuts across social and environmental issues. For example, SDG 1 is no poverty, SDG 7 is affordable clean energy, and SDG 14, life below water. And then you have some translations of those issues into the business side. So you have the UN Global Compact, which is a translation of human rights into what businesses can and should be doing. However, despite governments having agreed on all of those goals, they are actually not able to fulfill all of them alone. UN agencies have found that governments cannot fund their SDG priorities with public capital alone, and that's just the priorities. This is more severe in small island developing states and least developed countries that have serious restrictions to how many resources they can mobilize domestically. UN Secretary General has said that private sector leadership will be more important than ever for us to reroute and go towards achieving these goals. We are not on track to reach the Paris Agreement. In fact, we're going towards a 2.7 degree warming with catastrophic consequences, and we are not on track to reaching the SDGs either. Instead, we had some progress until 2020, and some of that was erased by COVID. Everyone here knows what sustainability is, not only because we're in Geneva, but because everybody knows what it is at this point. It's the idea that we want to allow future generations into the unforeseeable future to have everything that they need, including the current one. It is well known in the sustainable development community that the economy is embedded in society, and society is embedded in the environment. And they depend on each other in that order. It's also well known that these are all interlinked. There is no economic activity without people. There are no people without the natural resources that they need. If you save money all your life, and in the future you find yourself in a dystopian reality, your money will not be able to provide you with the life that you had envisioned for yourself. If you have material comfort, but you're afraid of your neighbors, that's not great quality of life either. When businesses think about sustainability, they think about these things a little bit differently because they think about it as separate things. They think in silos. You might have heard the term ESG. That stands for environment, society, and governance, those three silos. And it makes sense, right, for businesses to think of these things as separate. A lot of times, businesses don't have anything to do with the other end of a chain reaction. So, for example, if the interface of a business is its revenue stream somewhere, and revenue falls in a place, that's what they care about. If revenue falls because people's disposable income in that place has fallen because there was a drought somewhere that generated food price inflation, the business can't really address that. They're not going to act upon that. And that makes sense. However, some businesses are so big and reach so many places that they may unintendedly be generating negative impacts for themselves. And also, regardless, these issues are all interlinked. And in the long term, if we do not address climate change, if we do not address reining back in our footprint globally, everyone will be affected by this. Do you think that you and your business will be better off with the Sustainable Development Goals or without them? So what do businesses care about normally? They care about regulatory issues that are relevant to their businesses, for example, antitrust law, health and safety regulation, product safety standards. Think food safety, think elevator safety. These are very basic things that all businesses need to comply with. Then you've got tactical considerations. For example, if a business wants to enter a new market, they might consider the growth outlook for that market. Institutional political issues are very relevant as the Russia-Ukraine conflict is dramatically illustrating at the moment. And of course, you have preference issues, so consumer trends, investor trends, public opinion, reputation. As an illustration, some of the younger people in the audience might remember the Rihanna Snapchat incident, in which someone in Snapchat tweeted a distasteful thing, and Rihanna responded to that by telling her followers to delete the app, and the app stock dropped 5% in a week. So, and finally, we have physical resources. These are necessary considerations, and that's more obvious when we think about extractive businesses. So, mining companies, agricultural companies, they need to know where the resources that they need are and if they have a way to take that away. So if there are train lines, if there are bridges, etc. But every business needs to consider this. Where is your office space going to be? Where are you going to receive your customers? So how can we put sustainability considerations, or ESG, into regular business considerations? Some will fall in the regulatory space, some will fall into tactical issues, some will fall into the physical space category, and others are just not going to feature. So public opinion and reputation is the obvious one. The more people care about sustainability, the more businesses will care as well. In terms of growth outlook, in the financial system, ESG funds are growing a lot faster than traditional ones, and 1/5 of inflows into developing countries today is in the form of ESG funds. If the competition is making sustainability claims, you should probably be making them too. And there are many more issues. If risk of natural disasters is higher, your insurance will be as well. But what about more emerging topics in sustainability? For example, diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's being considered by public opinion as well. Human rights disclosures. That one is in the regulatory arena in many parts of the world. But what about other things? Some issues that we care very much about that are in the global goals we talked about before just don't make it in any obvious way. Oftentimes, social inclusion is a happy byproduct of some other business intention. What about, for example, nutritional value of food and agriculture products? People around the world eat food that was grown, processed, packaged, and distributed by corporations, not by governments. And this is something that maybe we don't really want that many regulations on. We don't want to be told what to eat, how much to eat, etc. We really need the companies to step up and make sure that what they are selling does a service to public health and not a disservice to public health. In the environmental category, we have the very successful example of ozone-depleting substance phase-out decided in the 90s and implemented in the subsequent decades, which was able to close the hole in the ozone layer. Carbon emissions is following a more bumpy path, but it is happening. It's falling into the regulatory space in different places around the world and very much in public opinion already. But then we have issues like biodiversity conservation and regeneration, in which businesses don't quite understand their impacts and dependencies, and it's not so obvious what to do. So for example, if you want to help with conservation, you cannot just plant the same tree everywhere around the world. It needs to be the right tree for the right place. If you want to protect different species, you need to do different things to do that in different places. So this can be very hard. Businesses would be right to say, but this is difficult. How can I deal with that? However, when profit is the purpose, these issues do not seem to be impediments. Complex and unstructured data is used all the time to solve problems for profit. Untapped markets at the fringe, marginalized people, are reached all the time for profit. You have very clear examples. For example, some insurance companies are using satellite images to verify claims. So, for example, let's see if a tree really did fall on top of a car. If that technology can be used for that, why can't it be used to see if trucks supplying your supply chain, your direct supply chain, are picking up wood from illegal logging sites? The same technology could be applied for different purposes. So why isn't it? We even have examples of space tourism exploration activities. Maybe a business case is needed? Well, impact can be profitable. Back in Rio, back to social inequality, we have the example of Banco Maré, which is a digital bank created by and for residents of the biggest favela complex in Rio that allowed people without addresses, because they live in a place that is very hard to deliver mail and to regulate, to have financial services, access to financial services, easing their life greatly and making their lives cheaper as well. You also have the example on the environmental side of Ciclo Orgânico, which is a business that picks up organic waste from households and makes compost with it to sell, reducing the amount of organic waste in landfills and reducing underwater pollution in that way. For much bigger examples, you have Banco Bradesco, which has created floating agencies to go into the Amazon through rivers and reach remote populations that live near the rivers. For an even bigger example, you have the Taobao villages in China, in which Taobao and China Post partnered together to integrate remote areas into that e-commerce dynamism. But if you don't see an obvious business case for sustainability, you might want to look for one. Because in the long term, this will affect you, whether you like it or not. Many places and sectors are already uninsurable and uninvestable. Furthermore, this is a work that needs to be done and that governments are not able to do by themselves. There is no vacuum of power. If you are the CEO of a large multinational corporation, you may want to consider what role you would like to play in this. I'm sure that the private sector can contribute so much more to sustainable development than they have so far. With your resources, your structures, your reach, and your amazing staff, I'm sure that we can do great things. We need all hands on deck. Thank you very much.